What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, June 15th, 2016, halfway through the month here. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. So getting into the news here, we're still seeing all these articles coming on out, including from some very respected names like Paul Craig Roberts. You know, the Orlando massacre, the lies, the exploitation, the unasked questions, and the official story has already pretty much destroyed itself. I didn't even get a chance to turn the egg timer over. I mean, the first story was, oh, he's homophobic, oh, it was an attack on gays. And then it turned out Omar Mateen was gay himself, was a regular at the Pulse, which sounds kind of strange. He would go into a club he was a customer of where everybody knew who he was, as opposed to going to someplace else where he might not be recognized or identified after the fact. And then, of course, there was that whole issue of him being Islamic. Oh, he's a gosh darn Muslim. Well, he's descended from Muslims, but if you look at all the people who knew that he was drinking, he's not a devout Muslim. And basically, getting back to the claimed 911 phone call, and apparently it wasn't just 911. Somebody claiming to be the shooter was calling all the TV stations. One of the TV stations actually said the caller was speaking fluent Arabic in between the English. And I have to sort of wonder how a guy born in New York, spending his entire life growing up in the United States, comes to learn fluent Arabic. But apparently, when he made that 911 call, the report was that he pledged allegiance to ISIS and Hezbollah. Now, the problem is that ISIS looks at the Shia as apostates. They're not really together or aligned. So Omar Mateen apparently did not know anything about Islam, or there was somebody else on that phone call who didn't know anything about Islam. It really is falling apart. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The Orlando police are rejecting a Freedom of Information request for a copy of the recording of this supposed 911 call, where Omar Mateen supposedly pledged allegiance to ISIS and Hezbollah and all this is for Allah and the rest of it, which tells us one of two things. Either the recording just doesn't exist, or the recording that they do have, if it's listened to by people who knew Omar Mateen, they're going to say that's not his voice. And again, the fact that whoever this was calling all the TV stations, they wanted as much media attention on this as they could possibly get. Get them on down there, make sure the cameras were there for all the crisis actors pretending to be wounded, walking in the wrong direction, putting the injured down once they thought the cameras were turned off. This was pure propaganda. And, of course, from the point of view of the media, once the killer's ethnicity was determined, oh, of course, it was terrorism. Now, when Timothy McVeigh supposedly blew up the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, we never heard the media screaming about Christian terrorists, did we? It's a double standard. Muslims are terrorists. Everybody else is okay. The Muslims are terrorists. Now, Paul Craig Roberts is continuing to come out with articles about what's going on, and he has a new one. My several million readers are unable to help me prove the official story. And he basically put out a challenge. Say, I want to believe. I guess he's stealing the line out of the original X-Files. Somebody give me some evidence that supports the official story, and nobody has. Everything is an assertion, a claim, a comment. There's no hard evidence whatsoever about any of this stuff. And by the way, do you remember back during the San Bernardino shooting when they were out there pushing terror, Muslim, and the authorities out there got into serious criticism because they did not seal the home of the accused shooters. They allowed the media to just wander on through, contaminate the scene hopelessly. Nothing in that house would be admissible as evidence from that point on. They did the same thing in Orlando. The Fort Pierce apartment of Omar Mateen was left unsecured on Monday, and the media just wandering on through unhindered. This really stinks. Okay, let's take a phone call. Keith in Montana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I had two for you. One, I just sent you a video link where one of the gals that knew this Omar claimed from her hospital bed that he did the shooting in retaliation for the bombing of Afghanistan. There's a video link to it. And also on 911 phone calls, all phones register with caller ID and everything like that. So there would be a viable record with that about who placed the call.
Well, maybe, maybe not. Most people don't understand. There are actually two forms of caller ID. There's one internal one that is secure and private. The one that shows up on your phone, though, the consumer-level caller ID, can be spoofed. Okay, but remember, 911 calls are supposed to be open public records. There's obviously no ongoing investigation. The patsy is dead. His right to privacy ends at that point. And again, I think what's going to happen, and all of these TV stations that claimed they got the phone calls, they are not replaying the call itself. And by the way, this idea of shifting to the retaliation for the U.S. bombing of Afghanistan and ISIS, they're thrashing around because the original motive of he hated gays has fallen apart. The claim that he's a jihadi is falling apart. This guy was tied in with U.S. Security Services and G4S, and his father's hanging out at the State Department. He actually ran for president of Afghanistan. They're literally trying to find something to gain traction with, and the more they thrash around, the more they change the story, the less and less people are going to believe it because it is so self-contradictory. They're in serious trouble on this one. They botched this one even worse than Boston and Sandy Hook.
Yeah, I would say one other thing about the 911. And when we get a dispatch here, dispatch knows that, if it's coming from a cellular phone, they know the exact location due to the GPS that's inside the phone that can't be disabled.
Yes.
So, if they won't release said recording, I'd like to know exactly where the GPS location was of the phone that was calling in.
Well, it could have been anywhere around the nearest cell tower. It could have been outside the pulse, just standing underneath the cell tower, making all of these various phone calls, to try and keep the data consistent. But the idea that they're already out there saying, just take our word for it, this was the guy, and he said all this stuff. And, of course, we're not going to take the government's word about anything at this point. It's absurd.
All right. Sounds good, Mike. Have a good day over there. Okay?
All right. Thanks an awful lot. Now, there is an interesting little article that came out in Investment Watch blog basically saying what I was saying the last 2 days. If you believe the official U.S. government story, Orlando shows the failure of the U.S. government on every level. The TSA crotch groping didn't prevent this. The NSA's spying didn't prevent this. The FBI, who is now claiming this guy was on their radar, didn't prevent this. This is a totally incompetent, impotent government, and we don't need to be giving our obedience and money to a bunch of total failures. Now, of course, everybody is out there on the gun ban, There's a senator doing a filibuster saying, I'm not going to stop talking until you vote through gun bans and the rest of it. And it almost reminds me of this little joke where there's a guy who's looking on the ground all around a street light at night. And somebody walks up and says, what are you doing? He says, I'm looking for my wallet. I lost it. And the guy says, where'd you lose it? He says, I lost it over on Elm Street. He says, well, why are you looking here? This is Main Street. He says, because the light's better. Well, they're doing exactly the same thing regarding guns. They're not able to stop, or they don't want to stop, the mass shootings. They can't find the bad people. So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to go over to the law-abiding citizens where the light is better and take their guns away. Which makes absolutely no sense unless you understand the government's real agenda is total disarmament of the American people, so we will do what the government tells us to do, and that is dictatorship. And the corporate media is cranking up the propaganda. It's time to, cancel the Second Amendment, and apparently Conan O'Brien was waxing eloquent saying nobody has a need for a semi-automatic weapon. Yeah, actually I do. Because the Mexican drug criminals are getting semi-automatic and fully automatic weapons from the U.S. government's Fast and Furious program. How do you expect me to protect my home when one of these criminals shows up? Wait 3 hours for SWAT to show up? I don't think so. Even Rolling Stone came on out with an article saying, Americans don't need to have guns. Only the bad guys should have guns, which is basically what all the gun control is going to accomplish. The bad people will have guns. It'll be a new product line for the smugglers to bring into this country. Or for anybody who knows anything about a machine shop, they can build guns. When I was a kid, I built a lot of black powder guns. It's not that difficult. And if you are living in a society that has been totally disarmed, even a reproduction of a Civil War 6-shot pistol gives you a lot of ability to do bad things. Now, there was an interesting little story over in the New York Daily News where they had this writer saying, what it's like to fire an AR-15. It's horrifying, it's menacing, and it's very, very loud. And he goes on in there about, he traveled to Philadelphia to try and understand the firepower of military-style assault weapons and hopefully explain their appeal to gun lovers. And it's very, and he goes on to say, I was terrified of the guns. This guy is clearly unfamiliar with weaponry. He's totally unqualified on the subject. So, of course, the corporate media is going to ask him to write a story about why law-abiding citizens should not want assault-style weapons. Now, again, I spent my entire life around guns. I grew up in a neighborhood in New England farming country where everyone had guns and knew how to use them safely. We never had a mass shooting. In fact, there was only one shooting of a human, and that was a botched suicide attempt. Mostly we shot animals to eat or chased them out of our farm fields. That was what the gun was for. Now, I fired an AR-15 on numerous occasions. It's actually very easy to shoot with low recoil if you're chambered for .223. It's a perfect home defense weapon for smaller people. Now, this writer's headline description sounds more like a Barrett 50. And I've test-fired one of those, and it is not for the faint of heart. But one thing Orlando proved again, the police are never there when the crime or act of terror is taking place. They show up late, in this case 3 hours, and cause more mayhem than the criminal. During the Empire State Building shootout, 9 bystanders were shot, all by the New York Police Department. The chief of police in Orlando is admitting many, if not most, of the victims of the Pulse nightclub were in fact shot by police officers during their recreation of the final scene from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. When a crime happens, there are only 2 parties present, the perpetrator and the victim. And the only way to thwart the crime in progress is to allow the victim their right to self-defense. Now, if the Pulse nightclub, instead of that gun-free zone sign, it had a different sign saying 5% of our patrons are armed, you guess which ones, in all likelihood the shooter or shooters would not have even walked in that front door in the first place. This gun grab is not about public safety. It's about government removing from you your constitutional right to say no to bad government. And if you really think of it, it's just absurd. Obama's out there saying, yes, we can stop terrorists and criminals by disarming the law-abiding American citizens. And I know it sounds crazy, especially since the U.S. government is giving military guns to groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, not to mention Mexican drug cartels. But work with me on this. This could be my biggest policy success since Obamacare. Now, apparently the United Nations is actually starting to hire disarmament officers to work here in the United States to take away American guns. They're hiring from other countries in order to get around that problem of Americans being reluctant to commit constitutional violations against their fellow American. All right, let's take some phone calls. We got a whole bunch. Mike in Kentucky, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, you mentioned that, and I seem to remember there was a lot of lumping in, the Klan with Christians and the militia, especially by which I guess they've lost their credibility somewhat, or at least we're supposed to think they have, where they were basically an investigative arm for the FBI. The Southern Poverty Law Center and a lot of the media accounts did a lot of demonization of trying to lump in,
they're all,
church-going Christian.
Yeah, anytime there's an event like this, everybody tries to spin it to their own agenda. The ACLU is blaming Christians, and it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, back then it was, I think there was a fairly common string of missives or whatever you call them, right-wing anti-government militia gun nut Klan members or something. You'd hear that from the radio. The radio talking heads and the talking heads on the cable, but it's a little over the top trying to blame every Muslim out there.
They're not just blaming Muslims. They're everybody's blaming their own pet issue. It's the fault of the members of Congress who passed the anti-LGBT legislation. ACLU is blaming Christians. Everybody is trying to pound on this for their own particular agenda. And I'd like to remind you, back when that whole Oklahoma City bombing situation happened, it came out most of the really radical, violent so-called militias had been set up and were being operated by undercover FBI informants. In order to generate the headlines, the government needed to keep you scared and subservient and obedient. Same thing they're doing now, where the FBI goes out and finds these vulnerable losers and sets them up for a terror arrest.
COINTELPRO, what was that called?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's back here. I mean,
version.
when the COINTELPRO scandal broke, it was such a huge embarrassment to the U.S. government. It brought the government to the edge of delegitimization. And they passed laws saying the FBI can't do that stuff anymore. But during Bill Clinton's time in office, those laws were rescinded. And now the FBI is allowed to go back and do these dirty tricks to generate headlines, to entrap totally innocent people and destroy their lives, for no more crime than not agreeing with what the government is saying right now.
Expressing the wrong opinions on your social media, and then going to work for this major corporation like this guy did they not do, personality screening and psychological testing?
They did.
Profile.
They did 2 background checks on him and found absolutely nothing.
They do personality inventories and things, though. They could screen for people that they could set up to do this stuff, I think. That's the high-tech other side of the screening. They
don't even need to do that. They don't even need to do that. If this guy was on prescription antidepressants, and he's been reported as under psychiatric treatment for, I think they said it was bipolar, people on those medications can actually be talked into doing some pretty silly and absurd things.
There's an episode of Elementary, the modern updated version of Sherlock Holmes.
I love that show.
About 2 months ago, you saw it then, where they hijacked this software that was designed to find more equitable jury verdicts. They were trying to survey for jury verdicts that would be more equitable across the board, and somebody hijacked the software looking for people that didn't have empathy so that they could hire them to be hired killers.
Well, anybody on ibuprofen right now would fit that bill. But this guy was a patsy. He may not have even pulled a trigger. I mean, this is so much like the Gleiwitz incident, where Hitler's henchmen took a real Polish national along with him, shot him dead on the spot so the body would be found. And that's how Hitler marched into Poland and triggered World War II. All right, thank you for the phone call. We're going to have to let you go. We got a bunch of callers waiting, and we're going to start taking calls when we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And an alert listener wrote in to remind me that because Omar Mateen's family was from Afghanistan, they wouldn't be speaking Arabic at all. It would be Pashto. And maybe the person at the TV station doesn't know, or maybe the person who was faking these phone calls didn't know. but there's no reason for anybody from Afghanistan to know Arabic, certainly not fluently. Let's take some phone calls. We've got a bunch waiting. Donna in New Mexico, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I have been researching online since this shooting event happened in Orlando. I can't find one single photograph of a dead body, of a wounded body. It doesn't matter how you phrase your search, what you wind up coming up with are the same photographs over and over of the grieving people, of the massive amount of law enforcement. Only once did I ever see body bags, and that was on a clip on Fox, right after, maybe the next day, 3 white body bags. I saw tons of stretchers, but no bodies. And I was wondering, and I'd like to know if you think this makes some sense, after the scandalous, what seemed to be very, very staged photographs of the Boston bombing, where you had people, a fairly large triage area, where people really didn't look wounded. They just looked like they were, and there was nobody there helping them. They were just sitting there, one guy with his leg off in a chair, a wheelchair. It just, he wasn't even in pain. It didn't even look like he wasn't even in shock. And I'm wondering if after the failure of that kind of what I would call what looked to be fake triage, if they decided not to do something like that with this event, because
that would make a lot of sense. That would make a lot of sense. That they tried to keep it simple to avoid all the embarrassing mistakes, and that made the mistakes that they were making that much more obvious. Like the 2 people carrying somebody, and as soon as they think they're out of the camera range, they put them down and start laughing. The other video where they're carrying supposedly somebody wounded toward the Pulse nightclub, which is where the shooting is supposedly coming from. This was a rush job. They cowboyed it, and they did botch it up even worse than Boston and Sandy Hook.
Well, that's what I think as well. One more comment before I go. I was watching a discussion program on RT, and the host they were all discussing all this violence in America and what happened in Orlando. And the host said to his guest, he said, who is Obama to talk about or question violence in America, given what his administration does on a daily basis in so many countries? How many children are killed, women are killed, drone violence, etc. And I thought that was a touche. I really did. And that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Well, it absolutely is. But then in the view of the government, they have a right to kill who they think they want to get rid of, but nobody else does. I mean, that's all that power really is if you think about it. The ability and willingness to do things ordinary people cannot. We're raised to say, thou shalt not kill. Most of us don't. Government does all the time. Thou shalt not steal. And we don't, but government steals all the time. Look at what the Bureau of Land Management's doing out in the western United States. Thou shalt not bear false witness. And most of us tend to be very, very truthful in the face of a government that lies to us about absolutely everything, thereby preserving the advantage to themselves. That's all it is. Their attitude is, it's okay for them to do these things, just not okay for us, okay?
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch to Mark in North Carolina. I'm going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, this thing is starting to have more holes than Swiss cheese. I brought up the fact the other day that this guy actually worked for Homeland Security as a law officer. He was a contractor, but still, that's who he worked for. I believe he was a correctional officer, and he was a court officer.
He had been in the past. We don't know what his current role for G4S actually was, but what we do know about G4S is they do a lot of dirty work for the U.S. government that is supposed to be kept out of view. And Judicial Watch basically reported G4S was part of this program to grab the illegal immigrants coming across the border from Mexico and drive them to other parts of the U.S. and drop them off without any paper trail whatsoever to make it impossible to locate them for deportation.
Right. And, he also, I didn't hear about the part that he said something about both Hezbollah and ISIS, because that would give you something right away. Because Hezbollah not only hates ISIS, fighting fiercely, helping the Syrian army defeat ISIS. Now,
we mentioned that earlier in the show, and either Mateen didn't understand Islam and current events, or the person faking the call didn't. We got to let you go, Mark. Got to take a commercial break. Back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right back to the phones. John in Barbados, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind today? John, are you there? Okay, I'm not hearing John, so let's go over to Steve in California while we wait for John. Steve, are you there?
Yeah, Michael, this comes down to one word, and John Stadmiller talks about it quite often. It's one word: blowback. From invading other countries, overthrowing governments, stealing resources, and victimizing people, there will be blowback.
Well, that's if you're buying the official story, and I'm not. And I've already been criticized for this. I'm basically approaching what happened in Orlando from 2 points of view. The official story is true, and the government is inept and incompetent, and all of this violence is because of all the mayhem dropped around the rest of the world. Or this is another classic false flag. Now, my personal opinion is it's another false flag. But the reality is, whether people believe the official story or they don't believe it, it still comes out very negative for the U.S. government. They have painted themselves into a horrible public relations corner with this.
I agree. I think this was a false flag. But other events that aren't false flags, there are consequences. And from our actions. If you stop those actions, terrorism will go away.
Well, the real terrorism will go away, but most terrorism is actually done by state actors to try and trick people into wars and so forth. But the reality is the U.S. government and Wall Street they're in an even bigger corner than the one in Orlando. They have embarked on this project for the new American century, which was designed to conquer the world and bring all of the world's economies under the control of the U.S. financial system. In order for the new American empire to basically, prop itself up with money from the provinces, a repeat of the ancient Roman Empire. And they've gone so far down this path, they can't call it off. They can't say, we were wrong, we're going to turn around and go back, or the U.S. economy would implode overnight. So they're stuck. They have to keep on going forward and hope it's going to work out well in the end. Meanwhile, as we look at what's going on with our military equipment and the quagmires all of these wars have already turned into, to me, the U.S. is definitely on the path to utter and complete defeat, even if it goes to a nuclear war, which it probably will.
I totally agree. You know, it's interesting. I'm sure they probably wish the PNAC, the Project for a New American Century, was never posted on the Internet. But it's right there. It spells it out what their goals were, and they followed through everything so far.
And they've rebranded themselves, and they're now linked with Hillary Clinton, who, by the way, Congress just passed a bill requiring women to be drafted, and Hillary was fully in support of that. So I just felt like mentioning that at this point. They're gearing up for a war, and they're going to throw all of our children into it, regardless of gender. And I'm sure the feminists are going to say, well, we didn't mean that when we demanded equality with men, but, you know.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you. We're going to go to John in Barbados. I understand you're back. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Yes. Are you now considering that this operation in Orlando was an FBI operation?
Well, I think the FBI had to be part of it. So did the Orlando police. It's not going to be just one group. I mean, they try and spread this stuff out to give everybody plausible deniability.
It seems rather strange that looking at all the people who knew this guy and reading what is on Twitter and Facebook and Skype, the guy was obviously a patsy. He was used.
Yes, he was. He may not have even pulled a trigger in that club. I mean, everybody was on the ground looking down. They've all been told this is the guy who was doing it, and they're hearing gunshots and somebody over them going on and on. But, we've got one witness now is saying the total number of participants inside the Pulse nightclub was 5, plus whoever was holding the doors closed from outside.
Well, I mean, to me, this looks like a classic operation where the other shooters were FBI and put a bullet in the Muslim man just to leave him dead on the floor.
Just like the Gleiwitz incident.
Exactly. They're just replaying history, really.
Yeah, they are, but we recognize that we recognize the history, and we recognize what happened the last time this dirty trick was played, which is why we're not going to fall for it. But again, the fact that Omar Mateen was a regular at Pulse, he went there all the time, he, was gay himself, it doesn't make sense. Even if he wanted to go on out and shoot up a gay club, he would have picked someplace filled with strangers. Yeah, and it just absolutely doesn't make any sense. So now they're out there, they're trying to change the story again. He was bombing for revenge for Afghanistan, and that fits in with the argument about blowback. Those who believe the official story are going to say, yeah, there's right. All of these wars on these other countries are placing us at risk, and the government cannot protect us from the revenge of these very angry, with justification, people. And so whether people believe the story or they know it's a fraud, it still works out as a public relations disaster for the U.S. government.
Well, my thoughts are that if Hillary Clinton makes it to the White House, she will be a war president again.
Oh, absolutely, no question. I mean, she loves seeing people killed, and she just cackles her head off when that happens.
But what I want to remind people of is in 2008, that squadron of Russian submarines during the Olympic Games surfaced off the east coast of America just to let the Americans know they were there as they were invading Georgia, South Georgia, going through Ossetia toward Tbilisi.
Now, those Russian submarines were in international waters. We need to be very careful here that we don't get somebody out there saying, they were violating, it was an act of war, we can invade them now. But something that needs to be kept in mind is when the Cold War ended, the U.S. actually shut down a lot of those monitoring systems in the ocean. The SOSUS nets were turned over to the whale watchers. I don't even know if they're still workable anymore. They still have the SIRTAS boats, but again, they're aged as well. And it may prove to be actually very, very difficult to detect Russian and Chinese submarines in this day and age.
Well, what I'm talking about is the Russian technology. We now know on a regular basis Russia has been taking out these American drones over Crimea and have actually done an Iranian job and took control of a global hawk and landed it. Just like the Iranians did to the RQ-170, one of the most sophisticated drones there was.
Well, the RQ was actually a toy compared to the Global Hawk. Global Hawk is top of the line, and if they did in fact get it down in one piece, that's a huge gain for Russia. They're going to know what the Global Hawk can do, how it does it, how to defeat it, how to evade it. And again, their electronic warfare capability is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I mean, the Donald Cook in the Black Sea and the other equipment. I mean, there was a rumor that they actually did the same thing to the Theodore Roosevelt aircraft carrier, which spent not 6 days in the UK, but nearly 10 days there getting repaired. But anyway, that's another story.
Well, it's not just the Russians. I mean, there was that embarrassment with the French submarine, the Saphir, that was able, during war games down by the Bahamas. The French submarine Saphir, playing the opposition force, was able to penetrate the screen and simulate the sinking not only of the carrier but several of the escorts as well. It was a huge embarrassment for the U.S., and they tried to hush it on up. But the reality is the quality and effectiveness of the weapons being produced by the U.S. military-industrial complex is absolute junk, very expensive junk, very impressive-looking junk. But when you actually get it out there in combat, it's just not matching up with what we're seeing come out of Russia and China.
Well, what I'm doing today is cautioning all those supporters of Hillary, who we know is intent on going to war with Iran as a mainstay. But, does America really want to commit suicide in a nuclear fire?
Well, I certainly don't. And, the problem is we're seeing this groupthink and blindness. There was another one of Hillary's emails that came on out, should have been sent secure, was sent non-secure, was intercepted. in which they're talking about the desirability of regime change in Syria to benefit Israel, and it includes the comment, Russia wouldn't dare to interfere. And it's another reminder. Everybody in Washington, D.C. is subject to wishful thinking. They're not really doing a careful analysis. I'm sure most of those people are running around convinced that Russia will never go to nuclear war, that Russia's going to back down, that they're going to win this thing. And if you really think about it, when two nations go to war, the leaders of both nations are usually out there thinking we're going to win. And obviously, 50% of the time, they're going to be wrong.
I think it's a look at what's really happening, the rhetoric from both sides, and I think Putin is trying to use diplomacy, and Obama is using war games.
Yeah, that's really what's going on. But again, Putin is a chess player. The Russian culture is very tied up with chess and careful thought and analysis. America's all about poker and bluffing and chess thumping, and it's not working. It's not working. If we get into this war, into a hot war with Russia and China, we're ultimately going to lose, even if it goes nuclear. I mean, the latest generation Russian nuclear and Chinese nuclear delivery systems can evade our very expensive ballistic missile defense system.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
But what I'm looking at this operation as a distraction from all of Hillary's criminal activities.
Oh, that was definite. That was obvious. I mean, the timing was very obvious. Trump was announcing this speech where he's going to talk about the Clinton crimes, and this shooting happens. And the media is immediately obsessively focused on it. They're still focused on it today. They're only taking an occasional break to talk about this terrible tragedy with the alligator at the Disney resort. And then they go right on back to Orlando and selling us this whole thing. And, Trump has announced he's delaying that speech about the Clinton crimes. And what are they going to do? Gin up another false flag or another spectacular distraction every time Trump schedules that speech? They might. I mean, they're desperate. They're scared out of their minds right now.
Well, I think it's also a distraction from what's happening in the South China Sea at the moment.
I would agree.
That is getting very, very, very dangerous.
And have you noticed that while the American people are watching what's going on in Orlando, that all of these European nations are starting to send troops into Syria without the permission of the Syrian government? The French are in there building a military base. Spanish troops have gone in. German troops have gone on in. Corporate media isn't covering any of that.
Well, I think the corporate media is a complete failure as far as I'm concerned.
Well, the corporate media is doing what they're told to do. The corporate media reports what the government wants you to think. And that's their job. That's all they've ever done. Okay?
Yep. That's all I have for you today, Michael.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go and get on back to the news here. Now, speaking of Judicial Watch, as you know, there is this kerfuffle going on over at the lawsuit brought by Judicial Watch, a Freedom of Information Act, open records case. It's not a criminal case. It's an open records case wanting the information about Hillary's email server, which anything government does, if it's not militarily classified, is an open public record you have a right to see because you pay for it all. And you have a right to know the government is doing the proper job. Well, the current roadblock has to do with Brian Pagliano, who's the political appointee that Hillary had set up her email server. Originally, it was in her home in Chappaqua. May have been a revamp of a private server they had in there going back to Bill Clinton's time in office. And then after that, it was transferred to this other company that was not cleared to provide computer services involving classified data. And so Judicial Watch wants to depose Brian Pagliano and just how this server was set up. And surprise, 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 he's trying to plead the Fifth Amendment, which is basically broadcasting that Brian Pagliano knows there is something criminal about the way the email server was set up. Now, Brian was trying to claim the Fifth Amendment, except that he's got an immunity deal, which means he can't take the Fifth. And in going back and forth over the immunity deal, the court has acknowledged this is a criminal investigation into Hillary Clinton by the FBI. And the judge in the case, Judge Sullivan, I guess is getting really tired of the Department of Justice and administration lawyers trying to weasel their way around it. And he's basically said Brian Pagliano's deposition will be videotaped and a full and complete transcript made public. Now, this has got to have Hillary Clinton absolutely furious, because if that video comes out of Brian Pagliano taking the fifth, it's going to be fodder for anti-Hillary Clinton commercials and documentaries from now through November. There's obviously a cover-up, and we don't even need to know what's being covered up. Just the fact of the cover-up alone should be enough to really make Hillary's vote riggers work extra hard to steal the White House. So that's what's going on here. Hillary's been challenged repeatedly why she was not cooperating with the original Inspector General at the State Department. Refused to speak to him. And there's been another revelation that has come on out. Yet another memo surfaced. A classified intelligence report confirming once again the Obama administration was actively supporting Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which later became Islamic State. We've had several of these revelations now. Maybe that's the reason for Orlando, to remind Americans that ISIS are the bad guys. You couldn't even begin to think our government is supporting the bad guys. That's just silly. We would never, ever do that. And yet, that's right out of George Orwell's 1984. And by the way, I got to tell you, looking at the United States right now, it's looking less and less like 1984 and more like Terry Gilliam's Brazil. And if you've never seen that film, you have to hunt that down. All right. Let's see. We're going to grab a quick phone call. Nelson in Quebec. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing? Well, what's on my mind was you disappeared. Now, I got to make it clear to you, you can't do that anymore. And as a Canadian, I'm going to be ticked off if you disappear ever again.
How did I disappear? Well, I'll tell you what.
It was off that network that we were watching on the internet there. I can't remember the name of the network, but I went back one day and suddenly your radio show wasn't on it anymore.
That may have been my previous network. But I'm back. I'm here at Republic Broadcasting. We've got podcasts. We've got Ron Gibson is also archiving my shows, so you can get the show over there. Got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, it's important to understand something about Title 18, which are the body of laws regarding, among other things, the handling of the nation's top secrets. Hillary's defenders are already trying to mount a campaign that she didn't mean to do wrong, that she had no bad intent, certainly not. She was running a spy ring out of the State Department while Secretary of State. And if she didn't mean to do wrong, then why are we all bothering? Well, if you're driving down the road and you have a moment's inattention and you run a red light and you kill a pedestrian in the crosswalk, you didn't mean to kill that pedestrian, but you're probably in serious trouble anyway. Now, Title 18 does not require criminal intent. It explicitly includes exposure of the nation's secrets through neglect, inattention, carelessness. That's the crime. There doesn't have to be intent. So we're looking at this story coming out of RINF.com, where apparently Hillary Clinton was discussing top secret CIA drone info, including approved drone strikes, on her BlackBerry. And this is all top secret special access program material. And if somebody was hacked into her BlackBerry, they might have sent warnings to the target, which means when the drones finally showed up, all they got were innocent civilians. And it's been notable with all these U.S. drone strikes that there's never any confirmation the original target has been killed. In fact, look at all the times the U.S. government has claimed to have killed this or that ISIS or Al-Qaeda leader, and then 2 months later, they're back. Now, another story coming out of the Daily Mail is talking about a cryptic filing from the Clinton Foundation that's covering millions in foreign donations without a clear path to the source. They don't know where the payments came from. They were sort of bounced around offices and simply listed as European donations without knowing who really did. They're hiding the stuff up. $18 million in foreign donations to the Clinton Foundation while Hillary was Secretary of State. Clear conflict of interest. Okay, I know we got a caller on the line, but I'm going to leave you until after the station break, so bear with us here. By the way, Department of Justice lawyers have donated $75,000 to Hillary Clinton's campaign. They are not impartial. Loretta Lynch is not impartial. And by the way, in New York, Hillary Clinton's campaign headquarters is just 2 floors below Loretta Lynch's New York offices in the same building. They're all buddy, 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 buddy. All right, we're going to take a break for our top of the hour identification. We'll be back with a phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're going to go to the phones. Charles in St. Petersburg. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I saw one blog about Hillary receiving at least 20% of her funding from the Saudi government. Have you seen that one yet?
I saw it. I saw the original news report. The news report was pulled down, and the official story now is that somebody hacked into the news site and planted the story, and the Saudi Crown Prince didn't actually say that. But, as we reported yesterday, the Saudi Crown Prince had come to the United States for meetings and talks, and all of a sudden all the doors are closed. Which sounds to me like he's being punished for having opened his mouth.
Well, according to this blog, they had the original Arabic. Of course, I cannot read that, but they claimed it's right there. You know, they had it written. I don't know, in the translation. I don't know where he admitted Prince Salman, or whatever his name is.
Yeah, he was probably bragging. He was probably bragging, not realizing that in the United States of America, it is illegal for any campaign to accept foreign money. But, of course, the Clintons have a past history of doing that. This goes back to the 1996 Chinagate scandal, and the money was routed through Chinese-American citizens to make it legal. But when Congress was investigating the Chinagate scandal, it turned out the money was coming from foreign sources, including Chinese intelligence. And Congress was looking to investigate and potentially impeach. But gosh darn it, that private email server inside the White House crashed and lost 1 million of the subpoenaed documents, and somebody had manually turned off the backup system just a few days before.
I'd forgotten all that. I remember going through the time when that happened. Yeah, you brought up 1939 about Germans and Gleiwitz. I think the whole thing was concocted by Roosevelt and Churchill and Renault. They encouraged the Polish chauvinists to massacre Germans. Over 70,000 Germans had to flee for their lives. 30,000 were killed, and the city on German territory called Bromberg, where 2,500 people were massacred. They always mention they don't mention that the United States the United States wasn't involved in, but Britain and France declared war against Germany, and half of Poland was occupied with the Soviet Union. Why didn't they declare war against them? And we have the ambassador, William Bullitt, who was married to Louise Bryant, Jack Reed's former widow after he died, married to William Bullitt, who's one of Roosevelt's chief ambassadors in France, operating at the time, who was a cheerleader for the Bolshevik.
Okay, can I step in here just a little bit? Okay.
Go ahead.
When I tell about the Gleiwitz incident, it's basically to reinforce to our listeners that these kind of deceptions do happen on a regular basis. It's business as usual for these governments. Now, I know that Winston Churchill, throughout the 1930s, was on radio saying that they needed to have a war against Germany because the British economy couldn't compete with the German economy. And that's really what it all came down to. They had saddled Germany with a private central bank, courtesy of the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I. And when the Nazis came to power, the first thing they did was kick that private central bank out. And as a result, Germany's economy just lit up like a Christmas tree. It was called the German Miracle. And Time magazine made Adolf Hitler their Man of the Year in, I think it was 1937, because of this amazing turnaround to Germany's productivity and economy. And that was a problem for the private central bankers, because everybody around the world was saying, hey, we should have the German system here. It's obviously working for the nation and the people. And, of course,
well, they did in one way, because as what's the economist, not Keynes, but Galbraith, John Kenneth Galbraith, said really the New Deal was just copied from, in his book, John Kenneth Galbraith, he said Keynes just copied everything from him. And I've read
who?
From Germany and Italy. Okay. The New Deal ideas were really just Fabian socialist ideas, and based on fascist ideas, really. This is right from the horse's mouth.
I understand that. Charles, I'm sorry. Our phone connection is deteriorating, and we're getting off into more detail than we really need regarding the current context of our discussion. So I'm going to thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here and get back to the current events. And I'm sorry to cut him off, but we need to avoid going off into stuff which it may be historically accurate but is really irrelevant to the subject under discussion. Getting on back to Hillary Clinton, story coming out of Investment Watch blog. Hillary Clinton has come on out and declared flat out, unborn persons have no constitutional rights. She has now arrogated to herself the role of goddess, to say that only when you are born do you become a U.S. citizen, and prior to that, you're just a blob of protoplasm. And as a fetus, you have absolutely no rights whatsoever. Well, go on back and look throughout history at people like Leonardo da Vinci, the Wright brothers, Einstein, Edison, Leda Ava Lovelace, Marie Curie. All of these people began as fetuses. And so you have to wonder, when they're running that little abortion factory, what part of the future are they destroying? And I think this idea of Hillary Clinton arbitrarily declaring a certain category of our society as non-human smacks an awful lot of Adolf Hitler. And you need to remember that Adolf Hitler's ideas of race hygiene were inspired by the 1930s eugenics movement here in the United States of America. And because of how Hitler abused the idea, the eugenics movement suffered a major collapse after the war, and now they're trying to bring it back. Now, I understand there's a population problem, and there always will be, because sex is a lot more fun than dying. But I get really upset over people who think because they have fame, or they have money, or married into money especially, Melinda Gates, that they now have the right to tell other people whether they may or may not have children, or whether they should die at an earlier age. We're seeing a lot of that coming on out. And I find that very, very offensive. Anytime somebody comes up to me and says, there's too many humans in the world, I say, okay, there's a very tall building right over there. Feel free to jump off, try and hit a banker on the way down. But don't you dare get up there and say that somebody else has to die because you think there are too many people. And I find Hillary's idea of simply arbitrarily saying that you're not human until you're born tyrannical in the extreme and uneducated. Nobody really knows at what point the fetus becomes conscious. You ask any mother who's dealt with, feet and hands kicking around in there. It's not an inanimate object until the moment it's born. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, the Congress just passed a bill that will open up your daughters to be drafted into combat. And Hillary Clinton is perfectly on board with that. She wants a war. She wants all of your children to fight in her war. She's already announced she's going to start a war with Iran. We had a video the other day where she's out there laughing about war with Iran, saying we have to provoke them to attack us so it will unite the country behind the leadership. I mean, they're telling you how the war gets started. Now, yesterday we were reporting on how Bernie Sanders was meeting with the Democratic leadership and with Hillary, and apparently they made him another offer, and apparently he turned him down again because he's out there announcing that he is staying in the race until the convention. And that's going to make Hillary Clinton absolutely furious. And I'll tell you what we all need right now. We need a complete recount of the vote in California. We know this election is crooked. We know the Clintons love to cheat. They have no sense of honor whatsoever. Now, remember the other day when Sheldon Adelson made an offer to Donald Trump of a $200 million donation to his campaign if Donald Trump would choose Newt Gingrich as his running mate. And Trump turned him down. And now we're finding out that was the smart thing to do. Because Newt Gingrich is now out there saying it's time to create a new version of the House Un-American Activities Committee. Now, if you know anything about history, you will know that the House Un-American Activities Committee destroyed the lives of anybody who questioned the government's policies toward Russia during the Cold War. They absolutely ruined innocent lives, drove people to suicide. Now, not too long ago, there was a movie that came on out with George Clooney called Good Night and Good Luck, about the life and times of Edward R. Murrow, who's one of my personal heroes. And that's another movie you should look at, because it shows what people were up against during that House Un-American Activities Committee. It was basically a government hammer to smash down anybody who refused to believe as they were told to believe, think what they were told to think, say what they were told to say. So let's grab a couple of phone calls. Alex in Florida, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I missed your show today, the first part of it. But is anything going on with Hillary? Are we going to get to count the votes in California, or are we just sweeping that under the carpet?
Well, I imagine.
Moving on.
I imagine probably. There's already at least one lawsuit out there calling for a recount. And once the lawsuit is filed, technically they're not supposed to be able to destroy any ballots. You know, but there may be a fire of suspicious origin at the warehouse where all those provisional ballots are being stored. I wouldn't be surprised to see that come on down. But Hillary's strategy is probably going to be to delay the lawsuits and ask for continuance and so forth until after the November election. And then we're going to be facing that gnarly question: can a president pardon themselves for felonies they have committed prior to being president? And that's a wrinkle that wasn't really considered by the Founding Fathers, because they were trying to design a country in which somebody who was a felon would never actually get to hold office. But justice delayed is justice denied. And, you know, Hillary's going to do whatever it takes to try and keep that situation in California under control and basically keep it out of the public eye. But everybody in California ought to be screaming about that. There was a video we put up the other day. There are 3 known areas where fraud took place. One was in assigning the no political preference voters to provisional ballots rather than the crossover ballots, because the provisional ballots don't get voted if a landslide winner is declared. The problem is there are more uncounted provisional ballots than all the votes Hillary Clinton supposedly got. They could easily reverse that outcome. The second area where fraud took place is the voter registrations for new and young voters who overwhelmingly preferred Bernie Sanders mysteriously disappeared from the voter registration rolls or were changed to GOP without their permission. And the third area of fraud goes back to those electronic voting machines, because poll workers there in the precincts were reporting the electronic voting machines were coming out for Bernie Sanders by 2-1, and yet somehow when the numbers got to the tabulation center, they were completely reversed. And somebody needs to do something about this.
I saw in Illinois they were doing the same thing. The voting rules are that they are to check 5% of the vote. The committee came in to check the vote, and the electronic tally was different than the paper tally.
Yes.
By a big margin. What the rules of that specific precinct are, the Illinois voting was to change the paper trail to match the electronic trail. And it hurt Bernie by about 30% of the vote. And they're doing nothing about it.
No, they aren't doing anything about it. If the billions that have vanished from inside the Clinton Foundation is Hillary's slush fund, like Richard Nixon had one of those as well. She's got enough money to buy all the election officials all across the country. We already know that's how she got the superdelegates. Somebody formed a PAC with a bunch of money that came from who the heck knows where, that went on out and made huge donations to all the state Democratic parties on the condition they support Hillary Clinton with the superdelegates, and presumably by running their primaries and caucuses to favor Hillary Clinton. Hillary is literally trying to buy the country.
Yeah, she sucks. What a communist traitor. I just can't believe it. I mean, I can believe it. It's just I can't believe where the Democratic Party is. All these years I thought, it's just the Republicans talking.
No.
The Republicans are just as bad, but they are real bad.
The whole system is bad. This is a systemic problem, okay? And the whole system has gone corrupt. And at this point, it's looking like Hillary's vote counts are a complete work of fiction and fabrication. It's no more real than, our Orlando shooting.
Oh, I know. I'm telling you, it's like unbelievable. And last night, you don't hear anything but Orlando on all the media.
Still going on Fox News. I mean, as soon as the radio show is over, I'm switching over to the science fiction channel. I'll get more truth and accuracy over there.
You got that right. Hey, Michael, I appreciate your time and keep up the good work. And what do you think? Do you think they're going to do anything about the private server and the email stuff that she was
my nickel, at this point, Loretta Lynch has basically come on out and said, we don't care what the FBI finds. Hillary Clinton could set fire to live children on her front lawn. We will never indict her. But I think Judicial Watch is close to hitting pay dirt. And if Russia does, in fact, have Hillary's emails from her server and they release them, there's going to be a huge outcry. And the current administration could find itself under serious fire for failing to do their job in the face of espionage or at least reckless handling of classified documents by their Secretary of State. There's going to come a point where the American people are going to stand up and say, look, if you're not going to do your job, get the heck out of our capital city. Because the government isn't doing their job, whether it's stopping terror, finding computer criminals, prosecuting somebody who may have betrayed her country while Secretary of State. This government isn't doing anything for the benefit of the American people. They're too busy taking care of Wall Street and Israel and blowing up other people's countries.
That's right. Do you think Russia has copies of those emails? Do you think that they would release them? What do you think?
I hope they do. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to wait until after the Democratic convention when, the Democrats are firmly welded to Hillary, and then they'll release them. And they'll, I think they're waiting to see if Donald Trump is still the GOP nominee after that convention. Because there's going to be a lot of nastiness for both of these conventions, okay?
I love it. Okay, I hate it, but I love it.
All right,
send everybody to jail. I want to send them to jail. It's not happening, unfortunately.
Me too. If I had investment capital, I'd be going long on tar, feathers, ropes, and rails. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Joel in Wisconsin. Aloha, Joel. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy. This is in regards to Hillary saying that a baby's not doesn't have any rights until it's born. Isn't there laws on the books that say you cannot tamper with an eagle's egg? I mean, do the eagle's eggs have more rights than a baby?
Boy, that is a really, really good point to bring up. Yeah, that's a really good point. But, we've seen that already, where ordinary humans are considered inferior to the endangered species and whatever other liberal fantasies are floating around there. But you're absolutely right.
This is an old story you can check out, and maybe it's not worth it.
I'm going to take a look at it during the coming commercial break, which we are just now coming up on. So, Joel, thank you very much. I'm going to try and hunt that down. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I did go out and confirm it. In this country, in the United States of America, you can kill an unborn child, but if you damage an eagle's egg, you are going to jail, because eagles are more important than human beings. So are corporations. In fact, you carbon-based life form types, you humans, you're at the bottom of the social ladder underneath this liberal fantasy world. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Dave in Pennsylvania, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how's it going today?
I
just wanted to call in and to your show. I'm a year-long listener, and I wanted to address the topic of Hillary Clinton's presidency and, just the degree to how bold it is and how, on top of everything that we already know about her scandals and her just lack of complete, her disregard for the laws and her corruption, and how bold she could still be to go ahead and commit all this fraud in the election and to just do everything. It just boggles my mind.
Yeah, the more I look at what's going on, again, I have one of these Hillary for Prison T-shirts, and I wore it during our recent trip to Kauai, and people were just applauding and wanted to have their pictures taken with me, and there were only two people who were opposed to it, one of whom was a paid Hillary campaign staffer. And look, hello, are we not getting our...
Yes, yes.
Okay, I was hearing music, which usually signals they've lost the connection. Same thing here on the island of Oahu. I was wearing it out this morning when we went to Sam's Club, and again, people are saying, love the shirt, love the shirt, love the shirt, love the shirt. I am absolutely at this point convinced that all of these votes Hillary Clinton has supposedly won during the primary were all stolen. I can't imagine anybody, who is a rational thinking human being, considering voting for Hillary. I mean, with Travelgate, Chinagate, Whitewater, Flowerwood, Castle Grande, the murder of Vince Foster, all of this stuff. And on the other side, you got Donald Trump. What has he done? He hurt the feelings of the illegal immigrants. Oh, my goodness. And it just doesn't make any sense that anybody is really voting for Hillary, other than those who have been receiving, generous support for the local Democratic parties from her.
Yeah, exactly. It just, as you just said, it doesn't add up at all. And it really just makes you wonder what's going on, all the efforts that are pouring into just really fixing this thing up and just honestly handing it to her. And it's pretty frustrating as a young voter. This is, the second time around that I could vote. I didn't, support Obama the first time around. I didn't vote, but I'm a heavy Trump supporter. I've been following him the first time that I heard that he was coming out and running. And if they go ahead and try to steal it from him, if he wins the nomination with the GOP, and if they line up Hillary and Trump and more vote fraud starts coming out and more election rigging and everything, I mean, we're gonna have some issues. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, we have to look at what's going on in Venezuela, not to mention France. It's getting dicey over there as well. And as a matter of fact, the ACLU is suing the city of Cleveland, because earlier in the week we were commenting on how Cleveland has said Trump protesters will not be allowed outside the Republican convention. And the Republicans are going to be building a wall just like the Democrats are doing. Walls are good for us, just bad for the Mexican border. And basically the ACLU is making the legitimate presentation that excluding the Trump supporters is a violation of their right to freedom of speech. And it's got to be one way or the other. Either everybody can be there demonstrating and protesting, or you have to just clear out the space and send them all home, which is a violation of all of their right to freedom of speech and demonstrate peacefully. But by targeting the Trump supporters, very clearly that's political and that's favoritism. What they want are TV cameras outside the convention center showing support for whoever it is they're going to try and jam in Donald Trump's place. And
PR thing.
PR thing saying, oh, look at all these supporters for Jeb Bush or whoever it's going to be, or Mitt Romney, and there are no Trump supporters to be seen anywhere, so we're going to go ahead and do this. They could trigger literally nationwide riots with this stupidity that they're doing. Yeah. Thank you for the phone call. We got to take a commercial break, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And so we're talking about what's going to be going on in the conventions. From the way these conventions are being fortified, they know what they're getting ready to do is not going to be well received by the American people. And we are still hearing all this talk about somehow removing Donald Trump because he's a threat to the system. He's a threat to the war party. He doesn't want to make war on Russia and China or Iran or anybody. He wants to trade. He wants to rebuild our manufacturing. Peace through commerce. And that is a threat to our government, which doesn't know how to do anything except take money and kill people. I think it's time to write up a scorecard on the overall performance of the U.S. federal government and see if it's really worth keeping this thing around. What we need is a cash for clunkers program for the government. Take our old, bloated, inefficient, costly government, take it over to the junkyard, put it in the little machine that makes a solid metal coffee table out of it, and we all get a check for $20,000 to buy a smaller, new, more efficient government that does what we, the people, tell it to do, which is part of the job description Washington, D.C. seems to have completely forgotten. So, we'll see. The conventions are coming up. It will be spectacular, as it were. Now, over in Great Britain, there is a lawsuit that is starting to make its way into the court system about an Iraqi national who was grabbed by mistake and subjected to torture. And he's suing the Ministry of Defense, as well he should, because the Ministry of Defense had absolutely no justification for grabbing this guy and torturing him. Now, the dictators are going to say, well, look, we need to torture to get good information. But you can't get information from somebody who's the wrong guy. And they're basically talking about how if this lawsuit moves forward, it's going to open a floodgate. Because the vast majority of people that were grabbed by the British and the Americans were innocent of any wrongdoing. When Iraq was going on, the U.S. was out there offering rewards to anybody who could point out a potential terrorist or somebody who might know where Saddam's nuclear weapons were hidden. And because of the economic hardship, and sometimes just to get rid of rivals. The Iraqis would shop somebody to the U.S., completely innocent of any wrongdoing, who was then taken off to Guantanamo and treated very badly. That's just what was happening. If you are a baker and you have a shop on one side of the market square and on the other side there's another bake shop splitting the customers with you and neither one of you is doing really well, well, that other baker, I think he's first cousin to Osama bin Laden or something. And then that baker's gone, the bake shop is gone, you got all the business to yourself. This sort of thing does happen. When you set up a mechanism to incentivize turning over names, names will be turned over. When you pay the witch hunters to find and burn witches, they will find witches to burn. Meanwhile, Iran is going to the International Court of Justice in The Hague to reclaim assets frozen in the United States, which are starting to be whittled away under this ridiculous idea that you can take Iran's money for any act of terror without actually knowing for a fact that Iran had anything to do with it. Now, as part of the P5+1 deal, the U.S. was supposed to unfreeze Iran's assets. Iran has kept all of their obligations under the P5+1. The U.S. has not. They have not unfrozen the assets, and now they're trying to basically steal them under color of law is what they're doing. So Iran's taking to the U.S. to the International Court of Justice in The Hague. It is their money. And during that whole P5+1 debate, one of the big arguments was, look at how much money you're giving to Iran. They'll do bad things with it. We weren't giving Iran anything. It was Iran's money from the beginning that they were investing in our economy. And by the way, the U.S. treatment of Iran is probably having a chilling effect on other countries investing in the U.S. economy. Certainly that's got to be happening to Saudi Arabia right now, with all this talk about trying to frame Saudi Arabia for 9/11. And by the way, the head of the CIA says there isn't any evidence Iran had anything to do, or rather Saudi Arabia had anything to do with 9/11. We all know who did 9/11. It was a joint U.S.-Israeli operation. You had the dancing Israelis, Odaigo knowing the attack was going to happen ahead of time, Bush sitting in that school reading about pet goats, very obviously certain, along with his Secret Service detail, that he was not a target that day. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Crystal up in Washington State. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. You know, it always upsets me when I hear people are being tortured to get information, because I know that's not true, because if somebody tortures somebody, they'll confess to anything, including being Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny.
That's absolutely true. Most intelligence professionals will tell you that in point of fact, torture does not get you reliable information at all. Basically, the person being tortured is going to say whatever he thinks will make the pain stop. That's it.
Yeah, and that should be thrown out whenever anybody hears this kind of stuff.
Here's the point. Do you remember we were going through all those terror alerts? We have solid intelligence of an impending terror alert. Basically, the solid intelligence was some guy strapped to a table, waterboarded 150 times, screaming, "Stop! Stop! Yes, we're going to blow up a school bus, you know, and look for the guy with burn marks on his lips or something."
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally unreliable.
It is very much. What torture gets you are politically expedient confessions. That's what they did to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. They waterboarded him 175 times to get him to say that he was the mastermind of 9/11. That actually didn't work. They had to put his kids in these dark metal boxes with stinging insects and let him listen to the kids scream for a while. And that is the entire body of the case, that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was the mastermind of 9/11. That they tortured him into saying that. That's it.
Well, that's great. Thanks for saying this, and thanks for bringing this out, because people need to know the truth about torture.
They absolutely do. All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch to Al in Delaware. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I wanted to discuss Orlando very, very quickly. I'm a homeland security expert recognized here in the state of Delaware academically. And there's a lot of anomalies that I see with all of these shootings that happen to transpire, and they've always got a patsy. Now, I'm not saying he didn't do it. What I'm saying is I know for a fact that I know how police are trained. I know the methodology since Columbine, which was you're supposed to let me start again. Columbine changed the way police respond to active shooters. Before Columbine, what they would do is, if there was an active shooter in a location, they would set up a perimeter, and they would wait for him to contact the police, and they would negotiate kind of like a hostage negotiation situation. Well, that just gave the guy inside that was resolute to kill everyone, that just gave him more time. So they revamped their engagement procedures and says now, if there's ever an active shooter situation, police are now trained since Columbine, and Columbine was about 20 years ago, to rush in and check the shooter immediately. There is no wait for backup. There is no let's let the guy have a hostage situation and let's talk him out of it. No, you rush in, you take the shooter down. What happened in Orlando? Not that. It took SWAT 3 hours to mobilize to even get on the scene.
Actually, what we heard is they were ordered not to respond for 3 hours.
Right. It could be that, too. But whatever the case is, they let this guy, the sum total is they let this guy allegedly do his rampage on the inside, and then we hear that there was more than one person. And it's kind of reminiscent of San Bernardino, where a woman on national TV said that she saw 3 tall Caucasian men with rifles and not a short woman and a Middle Eastern-looking man. She didn't see that. She saw 3 people.
Yes.
And then the media just glanced over it and says, oh, that's, we're just going to disregard that. Even the Sikh temple massacre that happened, people reported seeing more than one person. They said that there was one main guy who walked in, but 2 or 3 guys that accompanied the shooter walking through the front door, and they decided to run off into the woods. The same thing happened with the Aurora incident. There's physical evidence that suggests that there's more than one person involved. So how many times are we going to see this happen? And we have people that are in different situations report that there's more people involved, but then they only get one patsy. That's the hugest anomaly ever, and I just wanted to say that people need to wake up.
Well, I think people are waking up. I mean, basically everybody is assuming Orlando was a false flag, except for the paid corporate media and, the undercover informants, which is a good way to spot them, by the way. You've got a wonderful litmus test. If you think somebody's an undercover informant, ask them what they think happened in Orlando, and you'll find out. There were even reports of additional shooters at Columbine. So, yeah, it is it is a pattern. They go on in, they stage these false flag attacks. They have a patsy that is going to wind up dead to be blamed, and that's exactly. And they keep doing it over and over again.
Right. It's the same type of MO every time, and they never catch the guy so we can actually interrogate him or it'll go to trial. He always conveniently dies, and this guy was.
Well, they made a mistake in Boston because Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was supposed to be killed. Somebody slashed his throat with a knife, but he survived, and that's why they got him a lawyer who went to the jury and said, he did it, lock him up. Nobody can talk to him.
Right, exactly. So I just see this as a very big danger zone. I used to tell people, anyone that would listen, I saw the trend that how they were taking ISIS, the American administration would take ISIS, they dropped them off in Libya, then they dropped them off in Syria, and I says now they're demonstrating that they can have this fighting force and allow these guys to be mobile, especially the radical ones. Says when they bring them to the United States, that's where the fight's going to start. And here it is. It's, these radicals are doing whatever they need to do, or they feel that they need to do, and the United States government is just letting them do it.
Well, I'm not sure that Omar Mateen was in fact ISIS or a radical. There's this claim that he was calling 911 and TV stations, pledging his allegiance to ISIS and Hezbollah, which suggests an Israeli hand in this operation as well, except that ISIS and Hezbollah hate each other. They're diametric opposites. And, so again, the story's falling apart faster than the F-35.
Exactly.
All right.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Pat in Nevada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. A question for you.
Yes.
Pagliano has an immunity agreement.
Yes.
Can't Sullivan hold him in contempt of court for pleading the Fifth and put him in prison?
I think so. I mean, Pagliano's...
I wonder how long he'd be willing to sit in jail for Hillary.
Well, my guess is that he's probably going to get very, very depressed and wind up dead in Fort Marcy Park.
That probably is true.
Yes.
That probably is true.
Yeah, he's a live liability right now, and they're trying to get him off the hook here. But again, the fact that he's pleading the Fifth is signaling to everybody there is some kind of a cover-up on that email server and how it was set up. There's a big, dark secret behind that server. And right now, the only thing that makes any sense at all is that Hillary has been replaying the 1996 Chinagate scandal, selling secrets to foreign governments in exchange for donations.
Well, I would like to see her indicted.
I absolutely would love to see her indicted. I want to see her in jail, and not out of a sense of revenge. We, the people, need to set a precedent, to send a warning to future politicians. Do not think that you can get away with the same nonsense that your predecessors did. We need to create a deterrent to corruption in this country.
Well, we need to fire Loretta Lynch. We need to impeach Obama. And we need to indict Hillary.
Well, Congress has the power of impeachment. What we need to do is basically impeach the entire government in Washington, D.C., is what it comes down to. Now, the good news is...
My suggestion would be I would vote for Trump, but I wouldn't vote for any Democrat, and I wouldn't vote for any Republican with a Jewish last name. Because I don't want to give money to Israel.
Well, I agree with you on that one, but not all the members of Congress who are supporting Israel have Jewish last names. What you need to do is go and look at their voting record, supporting all this huge amounts of money that are going to Israel. And, you know, I'm a friend of Israel. And pink slip all of them, regardless of their last name. Regardless of their last name. Okay?
Well, and that will send a strong message.
Absolutely, absolutely. Iraq doesn't like being ruled by a foreign power. Yemen doesn't like being ruled by a foreign power. Libya doesn't like being ruled by a foreign power. Why should we be any more comfortable with it than they are?
We shouldn't.
No, we shouldn't. Absolutely not. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Turning over to the war zones, emphasis on the plural. Russia Today actually got video footage of armed, fortified ISIS positions literally on the Turkish border. And Turkey isn't doing anything about it. And even more alarming, coalition aircraft to supposed U.S. forces that are there to battle ISIS and Al-Qaeda are seen flying over this position without doing anything about it, because they're really on their way in to bomb Syrian infrastructure. The U.S. is still trying to get Assad out and a puppet ruler in. And they're back to playing the same old game they have been playing before. Meanwhile, up at the Russian border in Estonia, there's another military exercise. It's an exercise, really. That's all it is. 10,000 servicemen from 13 NATO partner nations taking part in the drills. Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Luxembourg, Norway, Poland, Slovenia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Yet another military exercise right on Russia's doorstep. And by the way, NATO supposedly had a pledge to the member nations never to station permanent combat troops in Eastern Europe, and now they're doing it. 4 new battalions to the Baltics and Poland. It's absolutely not what they were supposed to be doing. Meanwhile, out in the South China Sea, the Third Fleet is expanding their area of operation outside its normal limits, trying to provoke China, trying to get them to do something we can seize on and say, oh, those gosh darn Chinese, we must go to war. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take a phone call. Fred in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, the move by NATO to put strategic forces in Eastern Europe, I had heard about it, but I had also heard about a previous move about 3 weeks or a month before that. There was 2 waves of build-up of military force in Eastern Europe. Wasn't there something called the European Reassurance Initiative?
Yeah, and they go by a bunch of names, but the bottom line issue here is NATO, in their agreement with the member nations, promised there would be no permanent stationing of troops in Eastern Europe, and they've gone back on their word. Very clearly, they're gearing up for a war, and they're gearing up for a war with Russia, and a lot of people are very, very concerned about that.
And also this McCarthy testimony before Congress, talking about the necessity, in his view, of countering a threatening Russia, or whatever language he used. We're basically seeing propaganda used against our own people, our own representatives?
Well, they've always used propaganda against the American people. It used to actually be illegal, but they do it anyway. But Congress has just passed legislation to literally create, a legal ministry of propaganda to lie to us. And they're doing it because they want to regain that ability to lie to the people with impunity. And they're trying to find some way that they can shut down the independent media and the people who are out there with the truth. I think that's why Newt Gingrich is up there talking about resurrecting the House Committee on Un-American Activities, because they're going to use it to go out and shut down anybody questioning what the government is doing, even as the government leads this country off the edge of a cliff.
What is the status of the stationing of tactical or strategic missiles in the Kiev portion of Ukraine? Is that still being pushed, regardless of what Russia is saying?
Yeah, the U.S. is still deploying their Theater high altitude defense missile systems and others all over Europe and all over Ukraine. At this point, Russia seems able to evade them. I mean, they've never really worked all that well. I remember during Operation Desert Storm, where they were out there proclaiming that the Patriot had a 95% success rate. And then after it was all over, they came on out and said, well, actually, it was only about maybe 50%. And certainly the Iron Dome has been absolutely unable to contend with the homemade rockets coming out of Gaza, and because they're not very accurate. They corkscrew around the sky, and that makes interception impossible. The Russians do that with their warheads deliberately for that very reason. All right, Fred, thank you for the call. Got to let you go, and we got another caller waiting as soon as we come back from our top of the hour station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to take a phone call from Ishmael in Washington State. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Michael. This is Ishmael. This is my first time calling in, and I just would like to thank you very much for what you do, talking about the money junkies, and I watch all the wars of all wars are bankers' wars, and I really appreciate everything that you do, and I just want to give my gratitude to you, and I listen to your show every single day, so I just want to give you a quick thanks.
Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. What part of Washington State are you in? Don't give a real address, but just approximately.
Auburn.
Okay, know it well. I used to live in North Bend, and I really loved it up there. I loved the people. They were refreshing change from what I knew back in Southern California. So thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to let you go here. Now, the current plans for the Afghan war. Remember back in 2008 when Barack Obama promised that if he was elected president, the first thing he was going to do was end the wars and bring our kids home. And now he's got just a few months left in his second term, and our kids are still out there being killed and crippled. And the current new updated operational plan for the war in Afghanistan extends now through 2020 and will cost $5 billion per year to make sure that the oil and opium continue to flow to American businesses. Congress has passed a $602 billion with a B dollar National Defense Authorization Act defense bill. Obama is making lip service that he's going to veto it. I'll believe that when I see it. Story coming out of Activist Post. Cheney, Rothschild, and Rupert Murdoch are now drilling for oil in Syria, which is a violation of international law. Israel is occupying the Golan Heights, and they're just auctioning off oil drilling rights. It's not their land. Under international law, they can occupy it militarily, but it's not just theirs for the taking. But of course, Israel always believes it's above the law. Laws are just for you little people, for you serfs and you slaves. The nobility don't have to obey the laws. What's wrong with you? By the way, Israel has cut water supplies in the West Bank during Ramadan. And apparently tens of thousands of Palestinians are now without any kind of water. Of course, if it's anything like Flint's water, that may not be a bad thing. But you need to remember collective punishment is a war crime. Now, Susan Rice is out there acknowledging this new giveaway to Israel, $40 billion. It's the largest military aid package ever given by the United States to any country. And Israel's saying, it isn't enough. There should be more. You have to give us more. AIPAC is out there criticizing the Obama White House for opposing a boost in Israel missile defense funding. And I'm sure Obama's going to get a call from Netanyahu saying, you better give us what we want, or I'll tell the world who really did 9/11, and it will be worse for you than it will be for me. Article out of Investment Watch blog again. The central bankers who control all governments by bribing the politicians have a 100% goal of pure oppression of the people to protect their scam, which is that they create the entire currency supply out of thin air as debt to themselves. And that's exactly what they do. They just create the money out of thin air, they loan it to you at interest, so you are now their debt slave, till death do you part. Over at governmentslaves.info, scared investors fleeing to cash at the highest level since 2001. Everybody is scared that something big is going to happen, whether it's triggered by the Brexit or some other event there. Over in France, as you know, they are dealing with the largest mass public protest since the French Revolution itself. And they're already starting to call it a new French Revolution. And French authorities are beginning mass arrests. They're just grabbing everybody and locking them up. And this is going to make things worse, not better, because it's sending a signal that the French government is far more concerned with keeping the banks happy up in Brussels than with the French people. And that kind of money over human sentiment is something that the French people remember from the time of Louis XVI. Here in the U.S., more signs of an economy that is hovering at the edge of collapse. They're doing everything they can to keep it looking good for the election year, to protect the incumbents. Student loan delinquencies are skyrocketing. Retail spending and home improvement spending is in decline. The Baltic Dry Index declines yet again. The pensions bubble is starting to burst. All of the indicators are there. It's just coming apart because of that 11th marble. And when you look at all the pain and suffering and war and starvation humanity has suffered for the last 300 years under this private central banking scam, and you will realize it is time for this to end. Bank of America is set to fire another 8,000 as the banker layoffs accelerate. The banks are in serious, serious trouble. Nobody's got money to put in the banks. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Bank of America has lost 70,000 employees. I'm sorry, they didn't lose them. They know where they are. They kicked them out. Bank of America has fired 70,000 of their employees since 2010. Their physical presence on the street is beginning to shrink. They're selling off branches left and right. Now, out in Los Angeles, county supervisors are trying to call for a state declaration of emergency on the homeless problem. And what they're trying to do is basically they want a new special state tax on people making more than $1 million a year to start paying for some kind of programs to deal with the homeless crisis. Los Angeles County's homeless population is estimated at 47,000 as of this year's count by the Homeless Services Authority. All across the state of California, 115,000 homeless as of the most recent numbers in 2015. Probably a lot worse than that. We've got 4,000 here on the island of Oahu. Because all the money is being siphoned up to the very, very top to feed those addicts, to feed the money junkies. Now, over in Europe, we're continuing to see a lot more friction over this immigration issue. German Justice Minister Heiko Maas is stating they're going to start cracking down on the growing problem of multiple forced and underage marriages that Middle Eastern immigrants are bringing with them, which so far have been ignored by the authorities. And Maas came out with a statement that is very relevant today. No one who comes to us has the right to put their cultural roots or their religious beliefs above our laws. Teddy Roosevelt said much the same thing about immigrants coming to the United States of America. If you come here, you will speak our language, you will obey our laws, you will fit in with our society. Over in Bulgaria, there's a man who's earned the nickname the Destroyer. He's a self-styled migrant hunter. He's got organized gangs of volunteers to patrol and hunt down illegal asylum seekers in Bulgaria. He's managed to acquire 2 armored vehicles to travel through the rough territory around the city of Yambol, near the border with Turkey. He says the reaction is so positive that he's got more volunteers than he knows what to do with. Now, here in the United States of America, over in New Mexico, an Islamic refugee was arrested carrying blueprints for the gas pipelines around the state. And the FBI has been called in, and the corporate media is not really reporting on this a whole heck of a lot. This is coming out of Judicial Watch. Now, maybe she's a real Islamic refugee, or maybe somebody tripped up and fell across another false flag terror attack. Remember on yesterday they were talking about, oh, we know ISIS has a kill list. They have 10,000 Americans they've identified that they want to go on out and kill. They're pushing the terror agenda. Orlando isn't getting traction. Yes, there are going to be more false flags. Probably every time Donald Trump schedules his speech to talk about Clinton's crimes, oh my goodness, a pipeline blew up there. Oh, the Golden Gate Bridge got bumped. Oh, this and oh, that. The pattern is very, very obvious. Now, following the revelation of the elevated lifestyle of the unelected members of the European Commission, more and more media is starting to pay attention to this. Daily Mail came out with an article saying that members of the European Commission literally have champagne and scotch delivered to their desks. They have an alcohol delivery service and a special restaurant delivering gourmet meals. All on the backs of the members of the European Union who are being driven into debt slavery. Now, George Osborne has come on out literally threatening that if the British people vote in favor of the Brexit and the polls are continuing to shift toward the leave, he's basically saying that he will hike the income tax to punish the British people for not listening to those who believe in the New World Order in the European Union. So they're down to threatening their own people here. Oh, it's amazing. Now, there's an interesting little story that came out, again, Investment Watch blog. Somebody hacked into the leader of Black Lives Matter and apparently found documentation that the purpose of Black Lives Matter is to create inner city chaos, to stir up friction between blacks and whites, to work against Donald Trump, and if necessary, they have a plan B. If it looks like Trump could actually be elected, they're talking about triggering some kind of a crisis that would allow Obama to declare national emergency and martial law. They are that afraid of Donald Trump because he's not one of the insiders. He's not one of the clique. He's not part of the war party. He wants to return the United States to honest business, peace through commerce, all the things that are a threat to the New World Order empire buildings. By the way, somebody pointed out that YouTube is now beginning economic blacklisting. If you put videos on YouTube and you have an advertising account with them, and by the way, they refused me completely, even though most of the videos I put up are just my wife's music videos. But if you have an advertising account with YouTube to monetize your videos, and YouTube decides your video might upset somebody somewhere, Israel, They will blacklist your specific video. No ads will be shown on it. No revenues will be generated by it. The EU now wants to impose a tax for sharing links on the internet. They're trying to find some way to hamstring and shut down the independent media without making it look like an attack on our right to freedom of speech. Sure, you've got the right to freedom of speech, you just have to pay the fee, which is huge. So they're looking at that. Now then, on to human-caused global warming. NASA is out there insisting that this spring was the hottest spring on record, and if you can't believe the Never a Straight Answer Agency, who can you believe? Well, actually, up at Big White, Canada, North Shore Mountains, Allison Pass, it's snowing there. The Big White Ski Resort is actually looking like they could open very soon. It's snowing in the Cascades, and we're talking heavy snow with, you know, hiking in a winter wonderland was the headline. And they're talking about this super rare summertime winter weather advisory for the Cascade Mountains. There is no global warming in the state of Washington. It's January weather conditions in the Washington State Mountains. Everybody's out there saying, oh, that's just Washington State. It's just one place. Trust us, the rest of the world is broiling. Well, you'd better sit down for this next one. It just snowed on the Big Island here in Hawaii. Up at the summit of Mauna Kea, there's now a coating of summer snow. Now, during the winter, yes, we get snow on the higher peaks on the Big Island and Maui. Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa, Haleakala. This is June 15th, and it just snowed on the Big Island of Hawaii. That's unheard of. That's absolutely unheard of. It's being described as bizarre. Yes, it is. Now, not all is bad news in the realm of human-caused global warming, because over in Vermont, they have produced a record harvest of maple syrup. And they're attributing part of it to the fact that they had a very long, extended season with low temperatures, which makes the sap run. Now, at the moment, the sun has no visible sunspots whatsoever. It's an indicator of lowered solar activity, which means the upper atmosphere is cooling, which is why we're all of a sudden getting this unseasonable snow. Snow on the Big Island in June. That's just right out there. Now, there's a very interesting article about a study where they went back and took solid climate data and used it to determine when the grand solar minimums occurred, how long they lasted. We know the sun goes through cycles. There's the 11-year sunspot cycle. There's the 22-year magnetic cycle. Russian scientists have said they're seeing indications of longer cycles of 60 and somewhere around 140 years. But we've only been able to study the sun scientifically for the last 100 years. There could be longer cycles. We haven't seen them yet. But those cycles do leave an impact on the climate, and we have the climate record. And this study that just came on out is saying we're heading into another grand solar minimum. And there's going to be a mini ice age from 2018 through 2030. And when you're looking at snow on the top of the Big Island of Hawaii, it looks like it's happening. It's already starting to feel like autumn here. But NASA's out there saying this was the hottest spring in all of history. Now, the global warming Nazis, the carbon Nazis, are dealing with a bit of a problem. Back in the 1990s, when the world actually was getting warmer, oh, it was great. It's getting warmer. We'll declare it an emergency. We'll blame it all on human activity, and we will tax them on their use of carbon. And by the way, carbon is not the demon it's made out to be. The EPA's declared it a toxic pollutant. No. It's actually an essential part of the chain of life. Commercial greenhouses will artificially increase the amount of CO2 inside the greenhouse because plants will grow faster, taller, produce more saleable crop. That's just what's happening. But carbon dioxide can be blamed on human activity. The worst greenhouse gas in the atmosphere is water vapor, but you're not going to convince people to pay a cloud tax. Methane is 10 times as potent a greenhouse gas as carbon dioxide. But methane is produced by deep crust microbes, bovine flatulence, life forms far too intelligent to listen to Al Gore and his nonsense. So they picked carbon dioxide because they could blame part of that on human activity. Actually, a tiny microscopic part on human activity, about 1%. We got this volcano over there on the Big Island that's putting out more carbon dioxide in a day than all of the automobiles on the mainland in an entire year. And by the way, the observatory that they use to measure atmospheric carbon dioxide is on the top of that mountain, right above an active volcanic system that pumps out CO2. So we're supposed to look at these escalating CO2 numbers and say, oh my goodness, it is a real problem, isn't it? It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And Obama is desperate to get you to pay a carbon tax because he didn't get the money he thought he was going to get from Obamacare. So he's got to find some other way to loot you and plunder you and take from you because that's all government knows how to do. Take from you, give to their cronies, kill people. That's the only thing they're good at. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're finishing up about human-caused global warming. And we're talking about this amazing occurrence that happened here in Hawaii, down on the Big Island, where it snowed on the top of Mauna Kea today. And again, to be honest, during the winter months, we will get snow on those peaks. It doesn't happen in June. It just doesn't. Now, the problem that is facing Obama and Al Gore and the carbon Nazis in general, their entire justification for forcing us to buy and sell carbon credits and to pay carbon taxes was their claim that carbon dioxide was warming the world. But very clearly, the world is not warming. Now, they're trying to recover by rebranding. They don't call it human-caused global warming anymore. Although, obviously, NASA did. NASA came out and said this was the hottest spring on record, which sounds like NASA's typical accuracy. And I know that because I did work for them. And I've told you that story many, many times before. But if the world is cooling, taxing carbon dioxide won't fix the problem, will it? But they're not interested in actually fixing the problem. They know that there's nothing they can do to stop the climate from changing. This is just another scam to get your money. So they're going to be coming out here and saying, well, you know, the carbon dioxide is warming the world and the warmer world is leading to colder winters and snow on the Big Island in June and everything. Because the motto of the U.S. government is, if at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. And that's what they're going to go on doing. It's all about control. It's all about money. Now, the FBI has been assembling a huge biometric database on us all. It's ultra top secret, hideously expensive, and it's probably going to turn out to be completely useless, just like the NSA's spying on us or the TSA crotch grabbing or the rest of it. And there's a very interesting reason why. This is out of Gizmodo.com. And they're talking about the FBI's facial recognition software. Now, the FBI has been using this system since 2011 to identify people during criminal investigations. The FBI has a database of over 411 million photographs taken from mugshots and driver's licenses. Now, the Government Accountability Office has released a report saying, we're not entirely sure this is a good thing. There are obvious implications for privacy, but the real problem is this facial recognition software has never been properly tested. and could easily produce a false identification. This thing could nail innocent people who would then be grabbed, taken away, and tortured to confess that they blew up the Hindenburg, or they personally nailed Jesus to the cross or something. And the GAO said basically that the FBI has never tested the accuracy of searches that are asked to yield fewer than 50 matches. The way the system works is they'll put in the raw take from the camera and scan it against all the pictures, and they'll get a huge number of this could be possible. But in order to narrow things down, they'll set a limit. How, show us, the top 50 or the top 2. And the FBI software has no way of ordering the accuracy of the photos. And even the Government Accountability Office is saying this could put a lot of people, innocent people, identified as suspects, put on no-fly lists, have their guns taken away. This is complete nonsense. Like I said, the United States today is looking less and less like 1984 and more like Terry Gilliam's Brazil. And here's where it gets really, really absurd. Story coming out of Freedom Fighter Times. Do you like camping? This is summer. People like to go out and camp. If you enjoy camping, you may be considered a terrorist by the U.S. government. Now, we got to take a break for commercials. More about this when we come back. Hello, I'm Erica. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about this article that came out over on freedomfighterstimes.com about if you enjoy camping, you might be considered a terrorist by the U.S. government. I think we need to get Jeff Foxworthy over here. If you're a camper, you just might be a terrorist. It sounds that silly. But the reality is that there's this amazing list of signals the government considers as making you a possible terror suspect. If you talk about individual liberties, you might be a terror suspect. You believe in individual liberties. If you advocate for states' rights, they consider you a potential terrorist, ignoring the fact that the Constitution does give most of the authority to the states. Anyone who wants to make the world a better place, boy, that would cover all of the current political candidates. Yes, we're doing what we're doing to make the world a better place. We're bombing all these people, for the betterment of the human race, whatever. Let's see. Anybody who believes that the interests of one's own nation are separate from the common interests of all nations. In other words, if you're a nationalist, if you put a higher priority on your country that you're standing on, that you were born in, that you grew up in, you're considered a terror threat, which I guess means Donald Trump, who wants to make America great again. He wants to put America first, according to this list. The U.S. considers him a terror threat here. Anybody anti-immigrant? Anybody in the Patriot movement? Anybody who likes guns? Anybody opposed to Agenda 21 is a terrorist. Anti-globalists. Right-wing extremists. Returning veterans. That is a slap in the face. If you volunteered for the military, you put on the uniform, you kept your promises, you did what you were ordered to do, and when you come back to the United States, you're declared a potential terrorist by the government of the United States of America. That is a slap in the face. Whether you agree with the wars or not, and I don't, we do have a debt of honor to those who put on that uniform. We do owe them. They're not being cared for by the government. They're being criminalized by the government. Now, in this new rush of gun grabber laws, they're trying to fit a provision in this mental health bill where anybody declared to have a mental illness will have their guns removed. And most people are going to say, well, I'd like the nutcases not to have guns, except for the fact that under the current psychiatrical industry, if you will, that diagnostic manual they have out there lists virtually every normal human behavior is now defined as a mental illness. If you want to eat safe and healthy food, you are mentally ill. You are suffering from orthorexia nervosa. And here is a pill to take, and by the way, we're taking your guns away. That's how absurd this has absolutely gotten. Alrighty, Russia is now the #1 wheat exporter in the world, and I can understand why. Russia is refusing to allow GMO into their country. Probably one of the reasons the U.S. wants to attack them. And people and nations who want safe, healthy food are buying from Russia. They are not buying from American farmers because, unfortunately, due to the fact that pollen does not stay confined to the GMO fields, a lot of America's organic farmers are having their shipments returned. There's currently a lawsuit by American wheat farmers against Monsanto because they thought they were growing organic, non-GMO wheat. And they shipped it off to their customers in China, who also do not trust GMO, and it was sent right back saying, we tested it. We're sorry. You're contaminated. Monsanto's official position is if you have a 10-foot buffer area around your fields, the pollen will stay there. That's nonsense. Bees carry pollen. Insects, birds carry pollen. Wind carries pollen. I mean, it's utterly absurd to say that this technology can be contained. And anytime somebody's natural organic farm gets contaminated with Monsanto pollen, Monsanto sues to take the farm because you're violating our patent rights. It's not an intellectual property theft. It's an industrial accident, and it should be treated as such. Now, holding up Hawaii is a good example. When the first Polynesians showed up here, this island was already covered with plant life, with palm trees, with ferns, with all the stuff. Nobody planted it. It just drifted here. It floated here. There were birds that had descended from birds that flew over here. And look how far Hawaii is away from everywhere else. So, good for Russia. Now, have you heard of something called golden rice? It was supposed to be this genetically engineered rice that was going to be fast-growing and very nutritious, and they spent millions of dollars developing it. And they were trying to sell this golden rice into a lot of third-world nations that are dealing with starvation right now. And unfortunately, golden rice, although it was supposed to be the industry's great solution, their crowning triumph, it turned out to be, like the BT cotton, another disaster. These GMO products grow great under laboratory conditions where everything is controlled. Moisture, temperature, humidity, light, everything under laboratory control. That's not the real world. Remember the BT cotton disaster in India some years ago? The government got into bed with Monsanto, ordered their people to plant the BT cotton, which was supposed to be more drought resistant than the natural variety, and it turned out to be exactly the opposite. BT cotton could not survive in environmental conditions where the normal organic natural cotton did okay. And thousands of Indian farmers had failed crops, lost their farms. There was this tragic epidemic of suicide of these farmers who'd worked their entire lives and they lost their farms in a single growing season. And the same thing is happening with the golden rice. It's not able to compete with the natural version. It is more susceptible to alterations in the environment, and it is not as nutritious. And apparently it's also more susceptible to plant infections. It's not a robust technology. Now, part of the problem is that contrary to the image that you see in movies like Jurassic Park, they're not going in there literally moving individual molecules on the DNA around. What they're doing is they're splicing out the DNA that does what they want it to do, and then they cram it into the destination DNA several times until they get something that actually survives. but it's not a real precise process. And they just get it on out there and sell it because the goal is to make money, and we don't care if it really works or not. If it makes people sick, well, we'll sell them a pill or something. Now, out in California, the anti-fracking movement has scored a bit of a victory in Butte County, California, during this recent election that Hillary stole from Bernie Sanders. Nobody was paying attention to Butte County because the voters overwhelmingly voted in a ban against fracking in Butte County, California. This is the fourth county in the state of California to pass this legislation. The people are starting to fight back. Now, no doubt the fracking companies are going to go to court and say it's restraint of trade, restraint of business. If TPP and TTIP get passed, the fracking companies will be given the legal right to ignore what the voters want. You're intruding on our profitability. You can't do that. Profits above all. Who cares if we scorch the planet? Egypt is saying that they have spotted the wreckage of that Egypt airplane, Flight 804, that crashed into the Mediterranean. And this may be interesting because there are indications that this is yet another in a long series of accidental shoot-downs by the military. Like TWA 800, the Iranian Airbus, that other Malaysian Airlines flight, 300-something. It does happen. The United Nations acknowledges it is aware of at least 25 cases where civilian passenger jetliners have been shot down by accident by the world's military. Most of them remain classified. Nobody wants to admit doing that. Remember how the U.S. government responded to all the eyewitnesses on Long Island who insisted they saw a rocket rise up from the ongoing Navy exercise and hit the 747? Oh, those people are all drunk. Those people on Long Island, they're drunk at sundown. They couldn't see anything. That was it. That was literally it. And, of course, as we reported earlier in the week, an air traffic controller who's now retired has basically come out and confirmed the radar did show a non-transpondered object rising rapidly from the surface of the ocean and hitting that 747 right from the middle of the ongoing U.S. Navy's Aegis CEC evaluations. These things do happen. Okay, the FBI is now saying that the investigation into the Orlando shooting may take years. Don't expect any answers from us. It's going to be a long time before we have anything to tell you. The stone wall just went up, in other words. Okay, let's see. Now, SpaceX has had a little bit of a setback. I'm a big fan. I want them to succeed. I want America to have a place in space again. But they're still having a lot of problem with the reusability of the Falcon 9 rocket. They had a launch that successfully delivered the satellites into orbit. It's just like any other aircraft. Getting up is the easy part. Getting back down in one piece, that's the tricky part. And Elon Musk basically described it as a rapid, unscheduled disassembly. When it was trying to land on the barge, apparently one of the three landing engines lost thrust and the whole thing flipped on over. And I would really like to see them get that work, although I'm kind of wondering why they didn't go with a parachute and airbag approach, which seems to me to be less problematic. But I've been out of the business for a while, and I'm sure they've got very good reasons for doing what they're doing. Very alarming story came out of Blacklisted News. Actually, they're quoting a story out of USA Today talking about the CDC, which has one of the few biosafety level 4 pathogen isolation facilities in the country. Now, BSL-4s are where they put the highly infectious agents that are lethal and have no vaccine and no cure, like Ebola. And apparently, CDC is self-policing. There's nobody looking over their shoulder to make sure their BSL-4 precautions are actually working. And this USA Today story is talking about this incident that happened. Most recently, these 4 CDC scientists were in their little spacesuit gear, and they were trying to go into the decontamination chamber, where the chemicals come on down the outside of the spacesuit and kill anything, which will then make it safe for them to exit into the changing room. But the shower wouldn't start, and the warning lights and sirens started. There was a cascading series of safety systems began to fail, and they were describing it literally as a screenplay for a disaster movie, where it looked like there might be a breach to the outside. Now, there is one final safeguard in the BSL-4 labs. I don't know that this is the case at CDC, but I would presume this would be the case. The air pressure inside these BSL labs, 3 and above, is kept lower than the outside. So if there is some kind of a hole, the air is flowing from the outside in, not out. And the air that is being pumped out of the room is, of course, sent through an incinerator to make sure that there's no pathogens. But again, this is another example of allowing our technology to become so complicated, we're not able to properly maintain it anymore. Everybody is cutting corners because of budgetary restrictions, because the bankers are sucking up all the money. And I have a little news flash for the money junkies. If you cut the safety systems on Fukushima, you're breathing the radiation. If you're cutting the safety systems on the Deepwater Horizon, that seafood you're eating may be covered in oil and corrects it. And if you cut the safety systems on the BSL-4 labs, yeah, you can get Ebola just as rapidly as somebody who's poor. So there needs to be a sense of responsibility. If they cannot absolutely guarantee the safe handling of these pathogens, they should stop handling them completely. Much of it is actually weapons research. Now, speaking of research and scientists, we were talking about Jeff Bradstreet. And about a year ago, he was found floating in a river, and it was declared a suicide. It has got nothing to do with him working with GCMAF. It's got nothing to do with him criticizing vaccines. Got nothing to do with Nagelays. The family has hired their own medical investigator to look into the case here. And basically at this point they're saying there's no way this guy committed suicide. It would be impossible from the angle of the wound entry. And yes, he was murdered. And there seem to have been a lot of scientists who were trying to work in the public interest who are dead under strange circumstances. And this is the deteriorated state the U.S. has come to. You will buy our dangerous vaccines. You will inject your kids with them. Now they're talking about a law mandating more vaccines for adults. GMO food. Whatever. We don't care if it works or not. We don't care if it hurts you. We don't care if it kills you. As long as we are extracting more and more money from you, that's all the American society is about these days. And that's not America. It's not what America was supposed to be. We're in a full-blown fascist economic dictatorship where everybody in power is just obsessed with taking more wealth away from the people. And the less there is, the more grasping they become, until the system simply locks up because we can't afford to buy all the things we are being ordered to buy. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, you know, part of this whole global warming, environmental thing was the search for renewable energy and what a great thing that was. And a lot of people got into solar energy because they were encouraged to. We're going to have solar cells. We're going to have renewable energy. And that posed a bit of a problem for the established energy corporations. And they basically responded by saying, you've got to protect our profits here. And we actually went through that here in Hawaii. where the Hawaiian Electric Company got really upset over how many people were starting to put up solar cells. And it was cutting into their customer base. And I had a friend who used to work in the solar industry here when it was booming. And then he saw all of a sudden the state stopped issuing permits for new solar installations. You had to really, really work to get one. And as a result, he had to change jobs. Okay, there we are. All righty. Now, out in Nevada, they are now passing a tax increase on solar energy users, a 40% tax increase. Meaning that any money you might have saved, any money, any gain from putting in the solar panels, that's now gone. It's going to go to the state. They got you coming and going. Support solar energy. Well, too bad. Now you're harming the oil and coal-fired power plants and the nuclear plants. We've got to take money away from you because it's not fair for you to live your life without being plugged into their corporate profit structure. I mean, it's really absurd. Getting back to the comment I made about allowing our technology to have reached a stage where we simply cannot maintain it anymore. As you know, yesterday was Patch Tuesday for Microsoft. And today, of course, is Space Palm Wednesday. And network administrators all across the country are panicking because the latest Microsoft patch has broken what's called group policy. When you are having to keep bunches of people collected together in groups for information and access control, that now doesn't work. We need to remember that there's a certain benefit in simplicity and reliability. And we need to get back to that. We really, really, really do. All right, we're coming up here to the end of the show. And it looks like corporate media is starting to fade away from their love fest with Orlando. Now we're getting a story where apparently intelligence sources are saying ISIS groups from Syria are going to Germany and France to commit acts of terror. So they're already back out here. More false flags to come. Sorry, that's obviously what's about to happen. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Thanks for joining us on the air, and thank you for all the phone calls. Have a good evening. Be skeptical. Be informed. Make good choices. Share what you know with everybody that you know. We need to get the truth out while we still can. Thanks to everybody who's donating to WhatReallyHappened.com. It is really needed right now, so our biggest thanks for that. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.